Welcome back to the One More K podcast. My name is Markus. We are on episode number 41. And today is a very special day because I've got two gentlemen with me who have both Welsh ancestry. So, first and foremost, there is, of course, Ned Phillips. Good morning, Ned.
Good morning, Markus. Indeed, Phillips being a very Welsh name. I've only ever been to Wales once, but in theory, I am vaguely Welsh.
And another special guest, very special to me for sure, is David Lloyd, who is sitting in Vietnam. Good morning, David.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. And as I said before, I'm a long-time listener since the first episode. And in fact, Markus, I can remember at a house party with you quite a long time ago discussing what the name of the podcast would be. And it had a different name that you were thinking of back then. And then so it's been great to see it go from an idea that you were mulling over to what you're doing now with Ned. So yeah, real pleasure to join you. And congratulations on where One More K is now.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, David and I actually go back also many, many years by now. We're still not that old, but you are very close to my heart because you have been part of my running success at Vietnam Trail Marathon, Vietnam Mountain Marathon. We had a lot of good time there together. You were pretty much the first customer of Leca at the time. You still received banana leaves, I remember, at Jungle Marathon. Yes. I was giving them to you after the race. And then we lived pretty close by in Hoi An, actually. So we had a bit of a shared community in Hoi An. So many good coffees at the coffee espresso place. So great to have you on the show finally. I mean, you are very well known across Southeast Asia as director of Topas Trail Series. So by now, 4 trail marathons, ultramarathons go under your name, under your Topas name. It's the Vietnam Mountain Marathon, Vietnam Trail Marathon, Vietnam Jungle Marathon, and Vietnam Ultramarathon. VGM, VTM, VMM, and VUM. So there's a lot of thing going on. We will go all into it. But as another introduction to you is also the personal side, which you were very kind to share some information about who you are before the podcast. And I thought I want to read out a bit about it because actually before Vietnam, you found some mountain passion in the Welsh mountains, where I spent a lot of time hill running and whitewater kayaking. That is pretty cool. I didn't know you can whitewater kayak in Wales, but apparently you could do. And then you did the Paddy Buckley round just before you came to Vietnam. What is the Paddy Buckley round, David?
So there are 3 major, or the best known big rounds in the UK, and the best known, 4 if you count Ireland one as well, actually. But the best known one is Bob Graham. The Bob Graham round, a lot of people know it because Killian came and had a go at it and took a record that had been standing for a long time. So what these rounds are, the one in Wales is 47 peaks, around about 100k, and you have to go around and hit all the peaks and self-navigate. So back when I did it, it was before Google Maps were there, and I didn't even it wasn't a GPS. You would go and you would take a paper map, find the route. So over the course of many months, would go and research and find the best lines across it, and then you'd string it all together, 5 sections, and go and attempt to do it in under 24 hours is the goal. So it was almost nobody knew it really before COVID, and then during COVID, the Bob Graham started to become a bit more famous. It was known in fell running circles, but not in broader circles. So Bob Graham took off, but the Paddy Buckley still remains quite relatively unknown.
Mm.
Yeah.
Nice.
I would say, just that we don't want to get away, but you may know the name Joss Naylor, who was the original hardman legend who set these incredible times. Yeah, you're right. I think the Bob Graham, Paddy Buckley, and the Scottish one is called, I forget right now, David.
I've forgotten as well. That's why I didn't remember mention it. I might have to Google.
It's okay. But you're right. These have seen a massive increase. And maybe in Vietnam, we can have the David Lloyd round one day.
I have talked about it with a friend of mine here about if I did it, we would certainly not just use my name, but maybe put 2 names together and make one. Yeah, it's quite different because it came out of the history of fell running in England. You know, as obviously you won't know well, Ned. I can hear that from your knowledge there. So it would be quite different to make one here, and also much harder, I think. But I think it's a retirement project for me.
And also, you actually organized a few charity fundraisers using the Welsh 3000s route, which weren't races apparently, but your first foray, your first attempt in organizing people together, and you've been doing this ever since pretty amazingly. What did you fundraise for?
Back then, it was actually a friend of mine's charity that was working in Africa to improve education there. It's called Awapo. And so we did 2 annual fundraisers for that charity back then. And then since moving to Vietnam, I've more focused on the Vietnamese charities. But yeah, it was actually thinking about this podcast when I look back to it and thought, yeah, well, really, that was where it began of me bringing people into the mountains that I love to explore. And actually, in those days, ultra running was tiny in the UK, and people thought running more than 20k or even 10k, or in fact just running on mountains, was completely bizarre. So these people I got involved with it were really doing something that was way out of their comfort zone, but everybody managed to complete it. So the 3000 is used to be, it was called 15 peaks over 3,000 feet. Now they say it's 14 peaks, but yeah, a really tough day out on the mountain, and it was just a great sort of pleasure to see people coming and discovering these mountains that I've been running across for years. And yeah, like I say, looking back on it, is where it all really began.
You didn't come to Vietnam to organize trail races though, right? You came to Vietnam for other reasons.
Yeah, we came for 6 months. So it was after we got married, my wife and I, we were going to go for 2 years working and traveling. So the plan was 6 months in Vietnam. And at that time, we were learning Spanish, because the plan was to go 6 months in Nepal and then a year in Argentina. Because like I said, back then, it was one of my passions was whitewater kayaking, and Nepal is the mecca for whitewater, and also, of course, mountain running would be awesome there. But I've still never been, because we just both fell in love with Vietnam, and it was never a conscious decision to stay here. It just happened. So yeah, we've been here since 2011.
So I shouldn't try to derail the conversation too much. David, I used to work for Action Asia magazine, and we used to cover a lot of whitewater rafting up in Nepal, the Kali Kandaki, which is the big river in there. And while I've never done it, we covered a lot up there. Oh yeah, that stuff looks unbelievable.
Unbelievable, and they're totally different, because it's big. That's big water boating there. Whereas in Wales, like you were saying earlier, Marcus, you didn't know it was possible. It is possible, but it's much sort of lower level and more sort of technical, rocky rivers. Whereas in Nepal, you're dealing with massive volume rivers, so completely different, more sort of alpine style kayaking. But yeah, so I never did it, and actually I don't whitewater kayak anymore, because in Vietnam, like when I first came here, there was no real trail running scene. There was no whitewater kayaking scene either, but the whitewater kayaking scene never happened, and the trail running scene did happen. So yeah, that's in the past now.
I mean, I know how hard it is to build a company from scratch in Vietnam, and I started doing this in 2019, 2020 with Lekka. You did it in 2011. I so much respect you for setting up Topas Trail Race Series. How did it go about? Like literally more than a decade ago, when even Hong Kong only had a few races. We had Sabrina on the podcast last week, and she was talking about her foray into trail running in 2012, 2013, and you did it also at the same time, but in Vietnam. I mean, how did it go all about to start this whole adventure at the beginning?
Completely different to her story, in that it was Topaz is a company already established, so it has it's been operating from 1973. In Denmark and Europe, and then also branched out in the 90s into Asia. And so it was in the 90s here in Vietnam, and also in Nepal and other places. But the company was also already established with adventure tourism, and also with the Eco Lodge, Topaz Eco Lodge up in Sapa. In 2013, the Vietnam Mountain Marathon was really begun as a passion project within that, to start a race because of the love of the mountains, essentially, and the fact that there was no trail running in Vietnam at that time. So I came in, as I say, in 2011. In 2013, it was started, but the people who worked on it at that time wasn't full-time occupation for anybody. It was a person at Topaz, Asger, and then I came in, and Jacob from the Danish Embassy came in, and Jerry from Singapore. You've had on the pod as well, right? And I think you know well, Ned. So she came in as well. So it was at that time really none of us were making money from that. It was a passion to start a race because there wasn't one happening here. So 2013, around 200 people joined it. And then 2014, a little bit bigger. And by 2016, it was 1,500 or so people. And that's when it became a full-time occupation for me. So I'd actually started Velo Vietnam, my cycling tour company. That was from scratch. But then 2016, when it became a viable business, then I came in and went full-time with full focus on the trail events to establish VMM, and also to grow it with more races in the series.
So what did you do then between 2011 and then the full time of Topas? What occupation was it?
I was doing travel writing. So I worked for New York Times, it's freelance, and various other magazines and newspapers, and also guidebooks, so UK-based guidebooks, footprint guides, insight guides. This is back in the day when people actually used guidebooks, paper guidebooks. So I was writing those on Vietnam and Laos, and also establishing Velo Vietnam, which is the cycling tour company, which does bespoke gravel and road cycling tours.
You're the reincarnation of Tony Wheeler.
So that was up to 2016, when we started. When I started, going full time on the Vietnam Trail Series.
I'm interested in that travel writing. In today's world of content, which I certainly believe drives brands incredibly importantly. Back then, writing was the way. I mean, in essence, really, today it's more Instagram, video, content. But back then, it really was writing. I mean, I'm interested in just your thoughts about that, because obviously the Vietnam grew from 200 people to 1,500. Were you conscious of the fact that your writing was part of that business growth?
Yes, for sure. At the start, so that was a big part of my role at the beginning, was telling the story of Vietnam Mountain Marathon and getting it out there, particularly regionally and into the world, trying to get it into the world press as well, because it started from nothing and nobody knew it existed here. So I was telling that story. And through a lot more at that time, actually, it wasn't a lot more about writing longer pieces, press releases, and really telling the story with words. Whereas now, very much so, it's more about the pictures. So if you look at our social media, it tends to be the visuals are telling the story, and then we have a much shorter caption on it. But we try still to keep that telling the story in a longer format through, for example, like website posts, and then also sort of blog posts, but also some longer form social media posts as well. But there's been a huge change from back in the day with the long style prose to the more sort of snappy content.
It's interesting because obviously Vietnam is a country that people know of, but they're not going to come to necessarily. But it feels like that, tourism for trail running is a real thing now. People are literally traveling to races. I'm interested in, as you tell that story, like New York Times, obviously it's a different audience. Were people connecting with it and coming from, obviously America's got its unique history with Vietnam, but for many other countries, I feel today that the better you put those beautiful images, and I've been to Vietnam, but not up in Sapa and not up in the hills. But when I see those images, I'm like, oh my God, this place is beautiful. What percentage of your races are tourists coming to Vietnam for a race? So you've created that income for the country.
Inbound tourism, as a percentage, it's gone down because there's so many more Vietnamese runners here now. So, but in absolute numbers, it depends on the race. So Vietnam Mountain Marathon, Vietnam Jungle Marathon are very popular inbound races. But a lot of those inbound tourists are coming from the region, actually. So Singapore is a huge market, and Thailand, although Thailand goes up and down, and we're always looking at these numbers and trying to work out why is it, what's happening. And it's quite hard to figure it out, of course. But Thailand has a lot of inbound tourists coming in. Whereas with some of our races, the other Vietnam Trail Marathon, which is in January, that one's almost 90% or over 90% Vietnamese. So it really depends on the race. But most of those tourists are coming in from the region, as I say. And then there's a smaller number flying long haul from America, from Australia, from Europe. But those runners, when they're coming in, they're making a full 2-week tour out of it. And our race is part of that. But of course, for some of them, and anecdotally speaking to them at the race, they've come because of the race, and then they've planned their trip around it. Other people, they've got a holiday in Vietnam, and then fortunately they found a race at that same time and they've built it in. So it depends, different ways. But our main target is regional inbound tourism.
I remember last year I did the 21K VMM in Sapa, and this super young British couple won the 21K. Who seemed to be just traveling by and just taking on the victory. I was like, oh, how dare you? But anyway, so let's do a little.
He was a fell runner, actually. We're talking about earlier the fell running background. He was an absolute whip because he was an extremely fast fell runner from north. So he came across the line, and we had a quick chat about his fell running, and then his girlfriend came across the line with a similar history. So two really fast mountain runners. Yeah, that was it. So they were double victory.
Bloody tourists, I'm telling you. But let's use this little 2 minute to promo your our races, because I think each of them is very unique and specific. So why don't you run us through why each race is unique, I would say, in Asia and the world? Because I've been to all of them. Actually, I have not, but I ran most of the courses. But yeah, why don't you just tell us why each race is unique, and let's do the little promo time.
Okay, so if we go from the beginning, then the first race established Vietnam Mountain Marathon. That's the big one. So that one's now up to around 5,000 people, and that's up in the highest mountains in Vietnam, so in the far north. So what makes that one unique is, well, one is the history. It's the 11th edition now, so people are coming and being part of something that's really been there from the beginning of trail running in Southeast Asia. Also, that one for Vietnamese runners, they used to call it like the Tet, the Lunar New Year of running, like the end of the running year. So it's at the end of year party for them. But in terms of the landscapes, is, as I say, the big mountains up there, going over one of the peaks up at 2,300 meters. You can see the highest mountain in Vietnam from there at over 3,300. And a lot of ethnic minority culture up in Sapa. So you've got, Vietnam has 54 different ethnic groups, and many of them are up in Sapa. So you're running through a lot of these different ethnic minority villages. So that's in September. And then the next one we established is the Vietnam Jungle Marathon. And that one I really love. And you've been there, I know, Marcus, and it's hard to describe how special that place is, but it's only 4 hours, 5 hours from Hanoi. But it feels like, at the beginning, it was almost like an undiscovered place. When you talk to people in Hanoi about that area, Phu Luong, they didn't know where we were talking about. And that area has everything. It's got the great rice terrace scenery. It's got the minority villages. It's also got the limestone, incredible steep side limestone mountains, and amazing trail. Maybe you can talk a bit about it as well, Marcus, after me, but it's just that everything comes together at that race. And it's the one place, actually, when I make a race there, or we organise a race, I'll go there quite a long time before the race and run the trails, and then I can stay happily after the race for a long time. And then I take my family there, my kids there every year for a holiday, because it's such a magical place. So that one is, and also it's a smaller race, so it's 1,500 runners, which is, I know it's still a lot of people, but it feels intimate compared to 5,000. And also we finished there in a little village, which before we made the race, it had one quite established homestay and one very small homestay. But then for the race, we create about 35 homestays in real homes. And on the first edition there, almost everybody stayed in that village. And it was great walking through the village, and you'd hear people sitting under the stilt houses, American accent, French accent, Spanish accent, Vietnamese person, all getting together in a village that, particularly at that time, was the back end of nowhere. So yeah, that one is a really special race. And then we made Vietnam Trail Marathon. That's in January. And that one's famous for the peach plum blossom that opens up right before the race. And so that one, for sure, I was thinking Vietnamese market, but also the regional market. So Korean, Japanese, Thai appreciate that plum blossom, peach blossom scenery. So it's got that, but it's also got an amazing finish line in a tea field, which is super beautiful. And then loads of really high quality remote trail with a huge variety of landscapes at that one. And also being in the Vietnamese mountains, the ethnic minority culture is there as well. And then we made Vietnam Ultra Marathon, which is the newest one. So that one is closest to Hanoi. And actually, almost everybody who lives here, whether it be international or the Vietnamese who do go on holiday, will have been to Mai Châu. If they're from Hanoi, they've been there. I'd been there a lot of times, and I kind of thought that place was too well known, and it wouldn't have the appeal of the other races. But then when I went there to inspect for the race, it's just a few kilometres from the town or the villages, which everybody knows is a more amazing, remote, super high quality trail that feels very, very adventurous. Because before we took the trail there, almost nobody went there. So that one has, again, the minority culture, the amazing mountains, the high quality trail. This is the common theme in North Vietnam, and why we keep making our races in North Vietnam, because it's just amazing scenery, amazing culture, top quality running. So those are my four races.
All incredible. Highly recommend them. Not much more to add than just trying it out. How do you see the ability to organize trail races changing now, given that Vietnam's population is expanding, cities are growing, and also trails are disappearing from time to time. And I mean, I used to train outside Hanoi in Thuc Son, and you've been there many times. And yeah, they're building roads. The trails are going away. So how is the growth of a country, which is good, also impacting the ability to organize trail marathons?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more concrete coming up in every area, particularly in Sapa, actually. So it's of course good for people if you live in one of the villages and now you have concrete. Then it's a lot easier to get there, and so it's better for the people for sure. And it's not good for trail runners, and it's not good for me and Kian who have to go and find new trail every year. So actually, every year I think, I hope I can go back and we can just use the same route again. Almost every time, actually probably every single time, we have to go and find a new way to avoid the new concrete that's been put there. But there is always new trail to find. So it creates extra work for us, but it's possible to find it. And actually, it's led sometimes to better race courses, but normally harder. Because if you've got a trail between villages, it's normally taking the easiest way. And then when we have to go off onto more difficult trail or even make some trail, then it tends to involve more gain. So particularly Vietnam Mountain Marathon has become more difficult over the years because we've had to find that new trail.
Just to jump in, so I have not done your races, David. I will come, as you know, I'm more of a backyard boring around the concrete these days, but I love. Just to stop for a minute, 5,000 people. Take a minute to appreciate that, man. Like, seriously, that blows my mind. If somebody had told me 10 years ago, 5,000 people at one race in Vietnam, I'd be like, no way. Like, absolutely no way. Ultra is a few hundred people. Does it continually surprise you that it's that big?
Yeah, in terms of being surprised by the numbers, when we go back to 2016 and the growth period, the major growth period, 16, 17, 18, through 20, it was always surprising to see this continual growth for sure. And then every time we opened a new race, there was always that doubt of, will this race fill? Because these numbers are getting bigger and bigger every year, and can it continue? And it has continued. So the surprise is less now because we've become accustomed to it. But in those early years of the real exponential growth, it was amazing to see it.
Can I ask, and you don't maybe have to answer this. For me, starting racing 30 years ago, nobody was making money. Like, it was only a passion project, it was well known. If you're a race director, you're clearly mad and you clearly love it so much because you will not be making any money. Please tell me, and you don't have to divulge any figures, please tell me with 5,000 people, it is a commercial venture today.
Yes, that can make money. So the smaller ones, particularly in the early days, less so. But now we've got to a point where it can make money, and also we can give away money. So we've given almost 500,000 US to charity through the races now. So it's sustainable for us, and it's good for giving to the various charities that we support. And actually, it surprises me too, Ned, when people tell me that they don't make money from some of the larger races, because I feel like if we can do it with what the numbers we have, that other racers can probably pull in some profit.
We had the main dude from UTMB on and said, until last year, UTMB didn't make money, so you're crushing UTMB. Let's go.
But not as... The thing is that one issue is costs are going up all the time, and we haven't put our prices up. So there's issues around that. So we have to look a bit more at cost control within our races now, because the thing is we want them to make some money so they keep going. So the one thing I'm proud of is that all of our races have continued since the beginning. And if they're a viable business, then they're a sustainable business, and they can keep going and hopefully continue long into the future. And if they were losing money, I don't really see how it could.
And then I'll let Marcus, because he has many more questions. Is this bootstrapped? Did you do this from your own blood, sweat, tears, and dollars?
No, well, luckily, because it's part of Topas. No, it was. It's part of the group. So no, it's not.
How was it when you went in 2013, 14, 15 to the local government officials in Sapa and explained this race to them? What do you say? I mean, I know you speak Vietnamese very well by now. I'm not sure back then, but just for someone in the mountains to hear, we want to organize a race through the hills. And how has also this perspective changed over the times now that you've been going back for more than 11 years?
Yeah, so luckily in Sapa, because Topas had been established with a local family as an adventure tour company since the 90s, then there was a really good relationship already there. Without that, it would have been a lot harder, of course, but because of this long-standing relationship that made things a lot smoother. And then following that, when we go to the new areas now, so in 2017 we could go to that second race area and tell the government what we'd done already in Sapa, and that government did look quite sideways at us, actually, because we'd only done it one time perhaps, and it was a new sport here and people didn't know trail running at all unless they were up in the Sapa area. So we really had to explain that one to them a lot more than we did the subsequent races. So when we went in 2018 to Mokcho to establish the race there with the local government, we were able to put up the videos of the other races. We invited them up to come and see our race in Sapa. But actually, within that first government meeting, when we were talking with not the province level but the district level, the head of the district, she within that meeting got on the phone to the head of the province and said, "You need to meet with us. We're going to come tomorrow." And we looked at each other like, this woman is incredible to just call right up to the head of the province and say, "We're coming." And then the next day we had a police car with us take us from the district to the head of the province, to his office. And we sat and we presented the project to them, because she really saw, okay, this can bring tourists here and this can advertise not only within Vietnam, but around worldwide for that region. So sometimes it clicks. Her name is Hua, and she works with Huong, and they are amazing. So that in that one instance, it was just incredible. And then at the latest one last year, we had 3 races to go to them with and explain the concept. So then it was much easier, but still not easy, because the idea of running 70 kilometers, all the other races are 70k maximum apart from the Sapa race. The idea of running 70k through the mountains is completely alien to the people we're talking to. So they have a lot of concerns. So it's not easy, but it's certainly easier than it was at the beginning. And it depends largely on if they share that vision for, as we talked about already, tourism. Not only bringing in the tourists for the race, but the race then promoting the region following the race. So you've got maybe 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people sharing beautiful photos of their area across Facebook, across Instagram. So we're pushing it out, of course, but then the runners are also pushing it out. And we always stress that tourism aspect to the leaders that we meet. But increasingly now we don't really need to stress it, because they can see and they buy in right from the beginning.
I mean, you were the OG, the original to start trail running in Vietnam, trail races in Vietnam. By now, I lost track, but there are a dozen more, at least on trail. And then, of course, there are 50, 60 more road races. Again, this number keeps changing every weekend now. It's almost as crazy as China, I believe. Like, how do you see that in inverted commas competition? Because I don't think you're playing the same league in terms of quality and in terms of what you offer there. But still, if as a runner you only have that many weekends to travel across the country and spend your time and also your money, like how have you seen that growth and how does it impact you?
The growth is massive. You talk about road running there. So, for example, this period of the year now, the October-November time, we've got just in Hanoi, the Standard Chartered Marathon, the Techcombank Marathon. I think there's still a VP Bank Marathon. There's Long Bien Marathon. There's VN Express Midnight Marathon. And these are all downtown Hanoi races. And when you go back to 2016, 17, there was no marathon here. So the growth has been extreme. And that's just Hanoi. And down in Ho Chi Minh cities, similar growth, actually less there, but there's still a lot of marathons. And then throughout the country, there are major marathons with thousands of people taking part throughout the year. So that's road. And then trail, as I say, back into 2013, or as you said, there was one. And now we just had to postpone a race, actually. And then we had to find a new date for that race because of the Typhoon Yagi that came through. A few years ago, we could have picked any weekend we wanted and not landed on another race. But this year, we found there was actually one weekend. It was also the right weekend in terms of peak period in Sapa for room availability, but also a weekend that there wasn't a trail race. So it's totally different to the situation we had a few years ago. There's some very large trail races, like in Dalat. I've done myself the Dalat Ultra Trail, so that also has thousands down there. And then there are many more popping up with, I guess, a few hundred runners, maybe a few with 1,000 runners as well. So in terms of the competition, think that there's still enough runners. It seems for us there are enough runners to fill our races, and then I think because of those more and more road runners coming up, and then the next thing they want to do is go and run trail. And I see there's still a lot of growth in road running. So I think for the near future is fine for us and for the other more established races that are out there. For some of the smaller races, I think it'll be harder because when you're competing with maybe there's, like say, a trail race every weekend, it's harder to push through the noise, especially when you look on social media now. You'll see so many racers pushing hard on Facebook advertising, sponsored ads. I think for the new races, it's really hard to break through that. We're lucky in that we were established already with a lot of our races. But the newer races we have, it is also harder for us now as well because we have to compete with the other races. So, but as I say, I think there's enough growth still in a number of runners to keep us and the others going.
It's so great to see. As Dylan Bowman says, trail running will save the world. You know, it's hard to believe that running makes people worse. It always makes people better. I like to believe, you know, there's some corners of ultra addiction that are maybe not healthy, but we don't need to go down those roads. But in reality, the growth is amazing, but it's still niche. If you walked down the street in Hanoi and stopped every person and said, have you run a trail ultra? Maybe 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000, I don't know. But it is, you know, we're going from a tiny, tiny, tiny niche sport to maybe just a tiny sport. And remember, trail, as we know, is niche compared to road. But you're right. The filter for trail is road because people do 5K, 10K, parkrun, marathon. They're like, oh, wow. And if they stick at it, they transition. Yeah, David, imagine in 10 years we'll get you back on the show. And you're like, yeah, we have 50,000 at the VMM now. Or you'll be like, oh, my God. It's always hard in the middle of a bubble to understand what will stop it because we're all caught up in it. But especially in a country like Vietnam, which is becoming wealthy. Let's face it, we can't trail run if you're not wealthy. If you're scrabbling for food, you're not hanging out and running. It is a luxury sport. But in Asia, as we see in China and Vietnam, I don't know, David, do you see anything that's going to derail this movement from tiny niche to tiny to maybe not mainstream, but a normal sport?
In terms of the numbers that we can get on our trail, what limits that is the congestion on the trail. So we're really maxed out now at our race in Sapa. If we put more people on it, then the experience goes down for the runners. So yeah, for our races, we're at limit in some of them. Also in Mok Chow, actually, our race in January, we're pretty much at in previous years, we've had to close it because we can't take any more. But the growth overall, it's hard to know. I mean, I know you used to do Ironman, Ned, and you've seen that reach a point and then it plateaus and people tend to perhaps do that for a while and then they'll stop doing it. Whereas I see with trail running, people seem to keep going with it. And there's more scope for growth because you don't need spend thousands on the bike. You don't need to spend all your life training for it either. You can train, you only need a few hours a week and you can do it in the city. You don't even need to go to the trail really to train for a shorter distance 10K race. So I think there's a lot easier access. And although I'm not quite sure it's got a luxury, I think middle class people in Vietnam and reasonably well off people in Vietnam can do it. It's not cheap, and it isn't cheap because we need to continue, like we said, it needs to be sustainable and make some money. But there are cheaper races which you can join. So, it's not for the masses, of course, because in Vietnam, of course, there's still a lot of people who wouldn't be able to afford it, for sure.
If you want to scale your races, just sell to Ironman. They'll take your 5,000 race, they'll put one of it in Nice and one of it in Kona, and you can do 5,000 each, call it the same thing, triple the price, and you'll be fine. Get it to 2 and everybody will be away. Look, I don't want to crap on Ironman too much. They're doing their thing. You know, Ironman is coming for trail, we know. And look, I'm sure they're good dudes. But I think in reality, you're right. Like, even there is growth because even if you're on the congested trails, and I've not been to Sapa, you must be able to go over the next hill and over the next hill and over the next hill and over the next hill, right? There is more trails to be able to do it. I think if it's done sustainably with soul, do I think Ironman has soul? Yes. Do I think Providence Equity, who owns Ironman, have soul? No. And, you know, if you become what ultimately is a shareholder company where it's only about the dollars, that's why I think Ironman has tipped and is turning. You know, there's only so much you can, rip the customer. There's, just in my humble opinion, not advocating anyone else's views here, but I think if you keep it soulful and true, customers will stay with you. Anyway, my rant, Marcus.
I was just saying that you gave Ned his red meat, so he jumped on it. All good. it's out of the way. We always have to have at least one Ironman rant per episode. So now it's done. Thank you so much. But on the front of acquisition, because we had Sabrina on the podcast, we did have Eugene Tan on the podcast. They're all individuals who started entities essentially that then they were acquired or integrated into the Ironman group. In your case, it's part of Topas, which is a tourism company from Denmark. I hardly can imagine you're going to sell that to Ironman. So where do you want to take this in terms of growth and also as a business? I mean, it is a business after all, it has to make money. Do you want to sell to Ironman eventually, or sell UTMB, or is it possible? I mean, give us some maybe future perspectives here.
Yeah, we don't want to grow actually. So I already think 4 is that's enough now. So luckily there's no need to expand and expand and expand. So we're at where we want to be. It could even be that there's 3 and we alternate one every other year. We'll see how that pans out. But there's no plans to sell the race. It's part of the series, so there's selling one out wouldn't really make sense for the. Yeah, so there's no plans.
Okay, then the follow-up question is, what do you do if there's UTMB in Vietnam?
When, I would say, not if. So yeah, well, you said when, sorry. Yeah, I think it's inevitable. Luckily, at the moment, as I say, there's a lot of runners to go around. So I think if there's one UTMB race in Vietnam, it will probably be potentially even be good because it will bring more trail runners in with their marketing power. So more runners, and then potentially they'll join our races as well. So there's one way to look at it like that. Could be a positive. If they came in and expanded, China's much bigger than Vietnam, I know, but I heard about 5 races, then more races and more races. If that happened, then it could be an issue for us and for other races as well. So I think it very much depends on their plans for expansion within Vietnam. But with one race, or maybe even 2 races, I think it will be fine.
As much as I crap on about UTMB, they do put on good races, and it will create people to have enjoyment trail running, as long as they, as you say, 1 or 2 is a net benefit for you, I'm sure, because they do put on good events. Again, I crap on them about the soul, but creating good events for people who enjoy trail running is just creating more customers for you.
My last question, and then I'll hand over to Ned again. But so if there's anyone out there that wants to know something special about Vietnam trail running, what would you tell them? Like, what's unique about this country that you haven't seen in other Southeast Asian, global, other countries?
I think ideally have a look at our race videos to see the amazing scenery that you're going to be running through. But one thing is the community here. When you stand on the start line in Vietnam, maybe you haven't got any friends that you turned up with, but by the finish line, you're definitely going to have some, because the community is so welcoming and so interested in international runners coming in. So yeah, if you're looking for a really friendly and welcoming race to join, then you can't really beat a Vietnamese race, I would say. So yeah, that's one of the huge things. And then of course the amazing scenery, the incredible trails, the culture, and also we have the history of the race here. Like I say, with the oldest race that people can come and be part of something that's been there since 2013. But yeah, I think a huge part of what makes the races great is the runners here. Like when you've been, Markus, and you come to the finish line. People don't just come to the finish line and then just leave. They come and they hang out together. That we put on. One thing I didn't mention, we put on really good food at the end. So we have a chef that we bring down from Sapa with a small team, and he creates a bigger team with the local people, and we put on a great spread in our finish lines. So people, they come and they hang out. We normally have free beer from a beer sponsor. So it's not just the race; it's the whole experience after the race. And a lot of people you see, they leave Vietnam with a whole new load of friends that they've made and the new connections on Facebook, and then people come back again. And it's not just coming back for the race; it's coming back to reconnect with those new friends that they've made here. Not just the Vietnamese friends, actually, the international running community here, the expat community, super welcoming as well, actually. So if you want to have a full sort of experience beyond the trails, then it's a good choice to come in.
And also, I'm always surprised how actually the expo before the race is so big. I mean, I went to the Western States Expo here in Lake Tahoe, and it was way smaller than your VMM Expo. So I do think that you guys and also other races in Vietnam put on a pretty good show with the expo, which is quite small in Europe and in North America, but I feel like Southeast Asia has put much more thought and commercial thought as well into how to sell stuff to you before the race, which I think is, for us as a brand, is great.
It's great.
People come to hang out and they come to shop big time at the expos. So that's another a great benefit for brands like yours, of course, that you can get your brand in front of people for awareness, but also to actually purchase as well. So the expos are a lot of fun.
Okay, and my last question is, would you be willing to participate on this call in a world first? You have to say yes.
Absolutely, okay. Yes.
So we have a Scottish man. I'm Scottish and Welsh, but I'm currently in Bali. We have a German man who used to live who runs a Vietnamese nutrition companies in California, and we have a English Welsh man who runs Vietnamese races. I did not know you spoke Vietnamese. Would you be willing to say a few words in Vietnamese about what Vietnam has either meant to you, to your Vietnamese runners? Because I think it's going to be the first time a Welsh, German, and a Scottish man on a podcast talking about Vietnamese trail running heard a Welsh man speak Vietnamese to his audience. Would that be okay?
A few words about why Vietnam is, say again, what you're after?
Maybe just a few words to say thank you to the Vietnamese trail runners who have supported you in building this. If you could... I don't know how good your Vietnamese is. I hope I haven't put you too much on the spot.
No, it's fine. I just have to think of something appropriate to say. I would say, chào các bạn. Các bạn đã tham gia giải chạy của Topas. Tất cả các bạn đã giúp Topas tạo một trail series rất là đẹp và có nhiều ý nghĩa. So basically, thanks to everybody, the Vietnamese trail runners, for joining our races and helping us to create trail series with a lot of meaning. Hopefully, that's cheesy enough.
That was great, honestly. No, but David, honestly, look, clearly we're three expats in Asia, where Asia has been a huge amount to our life, and the fact you've learned Vietnamese, I think it's amazing, and you've done amazing things for Vietnam. So I just thought it would be appropriate for you to say thank you to your community.
Indeed, I mean, I can only highlight that David is so important and fundamentally important to Vietnam trail running. I can't stress it enough. And again, on the race events, you're actually the guy talking in Vietnamese to the Vietnamese runners. And so you're introducing all the things you're on the starting and finish line talking in Vietnamese. I think it's amazing. And when I did the race, I actually thought the Vietnamese is talking, but that actually happens to be you. I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. Yeah, so also from, I think, all of us, thank you so much for what you've done in Vietnam and Southeast Asia in general. I think you definitely put the quality high up there for Southeast Asian races. Not many have achieved that. And yeah, great job. Good to have you on the show finally, because it took us some time to find time, given your busy schedule of 4 races a year and traveling a lot throughout the nature with little connection. So yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your story again next year, because there's probably more to cover, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. As I say, regular listener to the show, so it's been a real pleasure to come on and join you both. Thank you.
Nice. And now that David has spoken in Vietnamese, there's no pressure on Ned to speak in another language about his drop. I'm sure that Ned speaks many languages, knowing him. So Ned, why don't you enlighten us with which language today you're going to use for your drop?
Well, I appreciate it. I speak a total of 1 language, poorly English, Scottish, let's call it that. Okay. But David, that was super cool to hear you. I am going back in time for my little drop today. As you know, I'm old, but not that old, but I have always been fascinated by 6-day racing. I think we talked about you being OG, David, in Vietnam, which you absolutely are, but 6-day racing is really the OG of ultra from 1880. So here's a little poem about 6-day racing. It's called, unsurprisingly, 6 days. 6 days. It was the biggest, best sport in the world. 6 days racing in the gardens. You know those gardens in New York. Full. 20,000 spectators crammed in, cheering, drinking, gambling, while people in tweed ran round and round and round Madison Square Gardens for 6 straight days. This was 1880s, just before I was born. The biggest sport in America at the time. You think ultra is new? No. The Madison Square Gardens was sold out. Before UFC, before NBA, before Tay-Tay. They fueled with beer, bread, no sleep, tweed. Imagine the rashes. These people were heroes. Front page of the New York Times. Then, out of nowhere, it stopped. Sad face. Until today, new heroes. Ultra is back. Enjoy it. And when you are out on a 100-miler in your fancy gear and you complain, don't. Think about the ladies who used to do 6 days in tweed. Yes, ladies were the kings of ultra back then as well. They were good. Running has been great for so long. It's not new. And ultra is the oldest sport in running. But why 6 days, you ask? Because the big man in the sky said, no running on a Sunday. Damn, that's my favorite day to run. Get out there. Ned.
Thanks, Ned. Next time I'm going to challenge you to do this drop in Scottish accent.
I can try one day. It's not very convincing.
A wee bit. Okay, I'm going to do a little Vietnamese joke. Gamon Ang, Gamon Chu. Anyone out there who understands this know what I mean. So thank you both for listening. And anyone else out there, thanks for joining our 1 More K podcast. Until next time.